Hi, my name is Ezekiel and I'm glad you could make it. I'm actually interested in what we'll be doing today. So, on today's video, we'll be doing a real world app. We'll actually be creating an image gallery app. That's epic. So, on our previous video, we discussed on the object-oriented programming. Make sure you know what it entails, since all through my projects, I'll be using the object-oriented programming. What do I mean? We'll be using classes. So let's dive right into the code. So go ahead and open your code editor where you'll be writing your program. Okay, I've opened mine and create a file main.py. I've also already created mine. So we'll start by installing Pillow. No, I think I did that on the previous video, so we won't have to install it again. So for those who did not install it, just open your command prompt and run pip install custom tkinter, and also do the same for Pillow. Custom tkinter is the UI framework, while Pillow is an image processing library. So let's get started. We start by importing custom tkinter. From custom tkinter, import. This one is known as an asterisk. And also from Pillow. But note, we won't be writing Pillow, it will be PIL, capital letters. Import, we'll only be importing the image. So, as I said earlier, we'll be using the object-oriented programming. So we'll start by creating our class. I'll call mine class main window. Remember, it's advisable if the name of your class begins with a capital letter. And I'm not sure whether I mentioned this, but after creating a class, there's usually a function known as init. So what does this function do? So basically, when you write any code, I'll give an example. Let's say print hello world. Any line of code in the init function will be ran when you initialize your class. So how do you initialize your class? You'll come here and create a variable and assign it to your class main window. Don't forget the brackets. So if I run this, let's see the output. You can see it printed hello world. So anything written under the init function will actually be ran immediately after you initialize your class. But we won't be printing anything today. So we'll start by initializing our app. Create your variable and assign it to ctk. Remember, capital C, capital T, and small k. So we want to give our apps a title. So your variable dot title, remember it takes a string. So I'll be calling mine image gallery, but feel free to call yours whatever you like. Image gallery. What else? You also need to give it some dimensions. App dot geometry. So you need to note these two, the title for the title and geometry for the dimensions. So this also takes a string, but the values you put inside are written in a certain order. So we start by the width. What can we give it? Maybe 850. By you use the x. By the height, our height will be maybe 450. Then it also takes the X coordinate and Y coordinate. This determines where your app appears in relation to your screen. So I could give mine an X coordinate of maybe, let me try 200, and Y coordinate of 100. And remember, for you to finally run the app, you need to add the .main loop. Without this line of code, nothing will happen. So let's run it and see the outcome. Nice. As you can see, the title changed, and its width and height is according to what we specified. I might consider lowering this maybe by 150. So next one, we'll start by creating a frame. So this should be your last line of code. So everything else goes in between. So let's start. So we'll start by creating our frame. So this will be our main frame. So that's our variable. Then the widget itself is ctk frame. Don't forget that. And remember, and I'll keep on repeating this, that the first value is the master, and according to custom tkinter, the master is the container. By container, we mean what will be holding this widget. So we'll be placing our mainframe inside the app, meaning that our app is the container. So we'll list it as the first attribute. And before I forget, we also spoke about this value known as the self, but you don't necessarily need to use this word self. You can use any word, provided it comes at the beginning of your values. Meaning that if you had multiple values, the first value is what will be representing the current instance. So in our case, we've used self, and self tells the program that you're referring to the current instance of the class. Remember that you can initialize a class more than once. And now, using the self word or any example you may like, actually tells the program that you're referring to the current instance. So this is actually a coding best practice. It actually ensures you have a clean code and helps you access a variable outside the function where you created it. As we will see, I'll explain it. I actually forgot to do this. So in each variable, add the word self. So it's self dot, then the name of your variable. Okay, so let's write our container, which is self dot up. So next, we'll give it a width and a height. So since this is the main frame, I want it to fill the whole app, meaning that I'll be giving it a width and a height similar to the app's width and height. So a width of 850 and a height of 450. I know you may be wondering what this is, but I had already selected the colors I want to use. So I'll be picking from this. So next I'll give it a color, foreground color. Remember, it takes a string. Feel free to use any color that you like. So next we have to make our frame visible. So how do we do this? So we need to place it. So self.mainFrame dot place. So since it's filling our whole app, we'll actually put it at the beginning of our app. So its X coordinate and Y coordinate will be 0. So let's run and see. Nice, you can see. So next on, we'll be creating our menu bar. I'm actually thinking of creating a menu bar on our left hand side, on the left side of the app, and making it span from the top to the bottom. Let me create it so that you can see. So I'll create a variable menu bar, and it will also be a frame. So remember the container. So in our case, the container will be this self.mainFrame. So next we'll give it a width and a height. I don't want something too long, so I will maybe give it a width of 40. And since I want it to span from the top to bottom, I'll give it a height similar to my app's height. So its height will be 450. Don't forget to give it a background color. So remember, it takes a string. Next, we have to make our menu bar visible. So self.menubar dot place x 0 and also y will be 0. Let's run this and see. Nice. I think this is big enough. So one of the advantages that custom to Kinta has is that you can actually give your widgets a curving effect, a rounded border, not rounded border, a rounded edge. And this is actually controlled by the attribute corner value. But for all our frames, for both the main frame and menu bar, I like to give it a corner radius of 0 to ensure that it has a sharp edge. So remember, this attribute value corner radius is what controls how rounded our edges are, but in this case we'll be giving it 0 to ensure it's a sharp edge. But we'll actually use it somewhere else, and we'll see how it works. So next we'll create our buttons. So I'm actually intending on adding like 4 buttons, 4: the menu button, the home button, the folders button, and the exit button. Yes, 4. And as you can see on this panel, I'd already installed the icons I'll be using. The link is down in the description. So let me create my menu button. So self.menu. It's actually a button. So for the frame, it's CTK frame, but for our button, it is CTK button. But they are somehow similar in that they take like almost the same values. So we want to place our menu button in the menu bar, meaning that the menu bar is the container. We'll start by listing our menu bar. Next, we'll give it a width and a height. I'm thinking of giving it a width similar to our menu bar, which was 40. Height, maybe, should we do 30 or the 35? Okay, we'll see. Okay, let's do that 5 height. So for the background color, I want to give it a color similar to our menu bar's color. And our corner radius will still be 0. So I also want to add a hover color. So what the hover color does is it changes to the color that you've selected when your cursor hovers over that button. We'll see that. Okay, so go ahead and add the hover color. Then for my color, I'll be choosing this. So it also takes a string. Remember, you can use these values or use the words. These values are known as hex color code. And if you're interested in choosing your custom, just go to your browser and search htmlcolorcode.com, and you'll actually find a variety of colors, a wide variety of colors. So I'll place my button. So let's run this. That is too dim. So I need to look for another color. So that's the site I used. It's called HTML color code. You can see that if I hover on my button, the color actually changes, but this button isn't good looking. We need to do some changes. So we'll first start by removing the text. How do we do this is you write the value text, then give it a blank quotation mark. Next, I want to add an image. So how do we add images on our buttons? Go ahead and create a variable. So custom Tkinter has its own way of rendering images, and you have to use this CTK image. So next you have to give the value of your image, but before giving the value of your image, you need to first open your image. That's where pillow comes in. So go ahead and write image.open. Then this takes the path of your image. So I'll just go to where my picture is and copy the relative path. This is way much easier using Visual Studio Code, and paste it. After giving it the value of your image, you now need to give it a size. Don't forget the comma, size, then add some brackets. It takes two values, the width and height, and preferably this should be similar, since it should be a perfect square, meaning that the values should be similar. I think I'm going to give mine 24 by 24. The values are separated by a comma. And now you're ready to add. So go ahead, go back to your button, grab the attribute value image, then assign it to your image self dot img0, and run to see whether it works. Nice. As you can see, it actually works. Looks good. Okay, so we'll proceed and start adding the other buttons. So repeat the same process for the remaining 3 buttons. To save on time, I'll just be copying and pasting. So after our menu, you want to add our home button. After our home, we'll add our folder. Then our exit button. So let's go ahead and load the other images. Don't forget to change the values. So our first was menu, our second will be home, our third will be folder, our last will be exit. So if you ever see this blue, if your text ever turns blue and adding this backslash, you need to add a double. Yes, if you don't do that, it actually bring an error. So let's add our images to our buttons. So our home will be image 1, 2, and 3. Next, we need to configure where it appears. I'm thinking of giving each a 5 pixel distance apart. Okay, so we need to change. So our X coordinate won't be changing since we wanted to start at the beginning of the menu bar. What will be changing our Y is our Y coordinate. So what will you give it? We'll give it 40, 80. But for our exit button, I want it to appear at the bottom. So I'll just minus 40 from the height of our app, and the height of our app was 450, so minus 40 it will be 410. So let's run this. Nice. The buttons actually appear. Are they too far apart? I think they're too far apart. I think we could make some changes here, including this. Okay, I think this will be okay, but for the rest, I need to take them up, maybe by 5 pixels. So this will be 35, and obviously this by 10. So it will be 70. Let's see how it turns out. So I might actually not end up using all this space, but feel free to add your own buttons, custom buttons, but ensure they're functional. Nice, 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 nice. So I hope you can see the hover color. Whenever the cursor hovers over the button, the background changes. So next, our next issue will be configuring our exit button. So what should our exit button do? It should basically close the application. So let's go ahead. So let's create a function. Close, I'll call mine close. So what this basically does is that it closes the app. How do we destroy an app? How do we close an app in custom Tkinter? Use the variable that you use to initialize your app dot destroy. And remember, each function should take the value that you used to tell the program that you're referring to your current instance. In my case, I used the value self. So after creating our function, we need to now assign the function to our button. So go to your button, and add the attribute command. After adding your value command, write your function, the name of your function. So my function was self. Remember, you have to use the word self dot close. Don't use any brackets, leave it as it is. So let's see. So whenever I hover and press, it automatically closes. Congratulations on configuring your first button. So let's go to our next button. So the main reason why I added the menu button is that I wanted that whenever you press the menu button, the menu bar expands. I don't know by how big. Okay, so it's currently at 40. Okay, let me create a function. I'll call my function resize button, resize menu bar. Menu bar. So for this to work, you first of all need to create a variable that holds the state of your button. So go back here. So we'll be creating a variable that will be holding the state of our menu bar. What do I mean by the state? By the state, I mean whether your menu bar is maximized or minimized. So I'll create a variable self dot is menu maximized. So another best practice in Python is creating variables that somehow relate to the kind of work they're doing. For example, we created a variable known as menu bar, and it holds our menu bar. So this makes it easy to read your code. It's actually one of the best practices. So which best practices have we covered? Naming the variables, giving the variables a name relevant to what they'll be doing, and two, using the object-oriented programming, which is basically using classes in your code. So mine will be is menu maximized. So this will obviously take a Boolean value. What do I mean by a Boolean value? A Boolean value is actually a true or false value. But since as you can read, you can see that it's written is menu maximized. This actually is relevant to what it will be storing. And it takes a Boolean. So the value will be false. Since our menu would be maximized, it's still small. That's why it has a width of 40. So you'll go back to your function, resize menu bar, and write an if statement. If self dot is menu maximized is equals to false. Let's start with false. I want it to increase. I want it to increase the size. Oops. Don't forget to add your self value on your function. So if it is equal to, remember the double equal sign, what does it do? It increases the size of your menu bar. What's the correct value? Should we increase it by 100, maybe 200? We'll see. Self dot menu bar. So to change the value of maybe a button or a frame, you just reference the variable, then you add the dot configure, then give it the change you want. So I'll be giving it I will be change will only be changing the width. So the width will be do is 100. Okay, let's try 120. Also write an else statement. Else meaning that it's true. We'll just configure the menu bar to its original state, and its original state was 40. Let's run. Oh, okay. Before we do this, we need to assign this to our button. And before I forget, so after we increase the size, we actually have to change this value. So you'll go and write this self dot is menu maximized. You change the value to true since you've already increased the size to 120. But in this other case, after making it small, we need to change the value to false. So let's assign our function to our button. So we'll be assigning it to our menu button. Go ahead and write the command attribute. Command equal to self dot resize menu bar. You need to note this, you're not adding any brackets when assigning our function to a button. So let's go ahead and run this. So yes, you can see it actually changes, but I actually think that this is too small. Okay, let's try 150. See, we'll come here to our resize menu bar function, change it to 150, then run this again and see how it turns out. I think this is a little bit better. I don't want something extremely big. Or maybe you could add maybe to 170. This is enough. So one thing I want us to do, I want us to add labels. What will this be? What will these labels be doing? These labels will hold our texts. Like here, we'll add a label known as menu. We'll add a label known as home, then folders, then finally the exit. Let's go ahead. So go back to your init functions, and right below each button will do the same. So other than self.menu text, so it will be a CTK label. Take the same values. The menu bar self dot menu bar. So what width will we be giving it? Okay, we obviously know the height will be similar to our app. Which is 35. But for our width, we could give it maybe, so the width of the menu bar will be 170. So 170 minus 160, 110. We'll actually give it a width of 110. So at first we want to give it a background similar to our app, our menu bar. What next? We also want to give it a corner radius, although it won't be visible at the beginning, of maybe 6. What else? Okay, and a text. So the main reason you're adding this is that you can add the text that will reference the button. So in this case, our text will be menu. We'll also declare custom font. I like using the Times font. So this text to value the font type and the font size. It will be Times. Maybe the value could be 17. Let me close this. Okay. Where were we? Oh, yeah, here. So we want to make it visible. Dot menu text. Dot place. So I'll give it an X coordinate of 50. I'll explain about this. So if you note, our original menu bar is 40 and we are placing this at 50, meaning that when the menu bar is minimized in its original state, this text won't be visible. But when we enlarge our menu bar through the menu button, the text will actually be visible. It will be easier if you see it yourself. So since our height is similar to our button, meaning our y coordinate should be the same. No, I want to give it. I don't want it to be the same. It'll actually lower our height by 4, meaning this will be 1, meaning we need to place this 2 pixels down from the bottom, and this will be 2. Let's do the same for the rest. I'll just copy and paste mine. You need to be careful when you copy and paste stuff. Don't forget any of them, since all need changes. From the variable, you can't give them the same variable, and also some values. So for this, our value will be changing from what else? Oh yes, this needs to change to folders. And this will change to exit. So next we need to change the coordinates. Our first coordinate was right, but we'll have to change this. We said it's 2 coordinates from its button, so this will be 37. This will be 72. This will be 417. Let's run our app. As you can see, at first you can't see the text, but wait until you press our button. Our text appears. So if you note, our text isn't uniform, so we need to change this. We need to add an anchor. So repeat this for all your variables. We'll begin with this. So our anchor will be towards the west, meaning it will be towards the left side of the app. It's like aligning it to the left. We'll do this for all the texts. So after doing this, you also need to make some slight changes. We need to add some, since in custom Tkinter we can't add any padding, we'll have to manually add this by adding space before the text, preferably 3. I'll be pressing my space bar 3 times for all cases. So let's run this. At least it's somehow uniform. So next on, I don't know whether this font is too big. Could maybe like reduce it by 1. So next one will be changing the, we want, since this is a label, it doesn't have the hover color value, meaning that you'll have to do this by binding an event. I'll show you how to. So come down here and let's first write our event. So it will create your function. I'll name mine highlight. Highlight text, or I'll just call mine highlight. So as we said, it needs to take the self value. Next, it needs to take the event, since you're binding an event. And next, we need to specify which text, the label itself. So it also take a label value. So let me explain this. So obviously you said you need the self to tell our program that you're referring to the current instance of our class. Next, when you want to use custom Tkinter events, you need to add the variable event. So what do these events do? Have you ever wondered how will I explain this? Event is like after creating your app, you want it to listen to maybe certain actions. These actions may include the cursor moving, maybe the cursor moving on top of a button. That's specifically what we'll be doing. Now, the action of listening to this action is called event. Then you need to declare an event. Now, we want our program to listen and to wait for the action where we hover over our label and change its color. And we'll be doing this using the highlight. So what we'll just take the label it gave us. So this label is from this word that we used on our values here, label.configure. So the only thing we'll be changing is the foreground color. We could give it the same as our hover color for the buttons. So after changing the hover color, we also needed to go back to its original state. So we also need to create another function. We'll call it maybe unhighlight. I'll call mine unhighlight. And it should also take the same values. So this event, we don't use it, we just leave it the way it is. So we configure our label, but now you have to change it to its original color. So what was its original color? Its original color was this. Just go back to where you created the text and you'll see what its original color was. Okay, so the next step is adding the events to our text. So what we usually do is the action of creating an event is called binding. So what do? You bind an event to a certain button or a widget. So we'll be binding ours to all these text, the edit text, folder text, home text. So let's start. We'll start by our menu text. So you write the value you gave it. So mine was self.menu text dot bind. So this takes two values. The first is the type of event. If you go to the Tkinter page, you'll actually see a list of all the events and what they do. So our event will be enter. So this is hovering in, and hovering out is leave. Let me create it. Leave. So this is the type of event. So after taking the type of event, you'll write the function that you want to be called. That event is invoked. So our function will be, so you need to create a lambda event. Write a colon, then write your event self dot, ours was highlight. As you can see, so it also tells you it takes an event. So our event is this. So we created it using the lambda. So just leave it, list it event. And next is the label. So what do you want? Whose foreground color are we changing? It will be our menu text foreground color. So you need to list your menu text, self dot menu text. So the same will be done, but the only thing that will be changing will be the function. So for this time, it will be highlight. It won't be highlight. It will be unhighlight. So don't forget that, or else no change will occur. So we have to do this for the remaining. I'll just copy and paste mine. So go to your home text. The folder text. I'll cross check to ensure that everything is done correct. And finally, the exit text. So let me cross check folder text, home text, menu text. Let's run this. Okay. Yes, you can see it actually changes. Whenever you hover, it changes. I think we could lower this a little bit. Maybe by 2 more pixels. Should we reduce the corner radius? I guess we should. Okay, so let's make some adjustment before we go to the next step. So we want to lower our menu text to 5 and maybe reduce the corner radius by 1. So our corner radius will be 5. Let's run this again. It's actually way better. I'm thinking of reducing this size. I'm thinking of reducing our x coordinate for all the text by 5. So it will be 45. So Making these few changes, these few tweaks is actually part of coding. You edit until what you see makes you feel. So you'll also change the width of the menu bar by 10. It would be 160. Let's run this. Don't know what happened with this. Oh, we didn't change the width. 45, not 25, 45. Let's run this and see whether everything runs well. Nice. So one thing I wanted to do is I want us to also bind our hover on this such that each and every time we hover on this also lights. So let's go ahead and do this. So what do I mean? That when we hover on our menu, this text also lights up. Same for this, also same for this. So let's dive right in. So this is similar. We'll just use the same. The only thing we'll be changing will be this. Since we won't be binding it to our menu text, we'll be binding it to our button. So let's go ahead. So we are binding this menu. Such that when it hovers over this menu button, it highlights our self.menu text. Our menu text. Let's do the same for this other. So one of the main reasons why we won't be doing it right below this code is because I don't want to reference this menu text before we create it. That's why I'm binding it to this menu after we have created the text itself. Home. So remember, you also need to change this value to home text. Do the same for the rests. Should be folder. Also change this to folder text. So come down here, send it to our exit button. So I think everything is set. Let me cross check. Exit. Yeah. Oh. So let's run this. Nice. I hope you now see what I was telling you. Nice, nice, nice. This is nice. This is way, way, way nice. I think we'll have to change this. As you can see, it actually looks cool. So next, I want us to configure this. So these labels will actually act like buttons. So we'll start by configuring this exit text such that whenever we click on it, it also closes the app. So to configure non-buttons to carry out functions such as buttons, we'll also use events. So knowing how to bind events to widgets is actually something that is key since it has a lot of applications. If you, as you can see, when we hover over our text, this actually doesn't get highlighted, but you can actually change that. So we'll add an extra value. So to this event, the highlight event, we'll actually add an extra value of button. We'll add to both. So what this does is that it ensures that whenever you hover over the text, that the buttons also change the color. But there's a catch in this. Since we are using the same functions for even the buttons, we actually need to give it a different value for the buttons. So how will we do this? So after configuring it to this, we'll actually go. So I'll first write my code, then explain what it means. If button is not equal, so not equal, you use the exclamation mark. Then equal is not equal to a blank text. So this is a blank text. What do? You configure it to this. So button and configure it to so that it has the same color. We'll also do the same in this other case. But now the color will be different. So we'll go. So what does this mean? So in cases where this event is being called by the button itself, the menu button, when we highlight, we won't give it a value of the button. What we'll do, we'll give it a blank text, meaning that the button itself won't be edited. So we'll do this for all the buttons that you've used to bind. But for our text, we need to give it the value of the button so that it changes the color of the button. So in this case of the menu text, when we are highlighting, we'll also give it the value of our button, which was select.menu. Come and do this. We didn't change this. Next will be our home text. We'll give it home button. Next, our folder text. So let's run and see. Yes, you can see even when I hover over this, the button still changes, still retains its original color. You can see this is actually good. So next, we'll actually bind this. So we also want this to work as buttons, meaning that they'll be clickable. So we'll go ahead and edit our exit button, our exit label, and make it clickable. Close the app. So if you see, if I click, nothing happens. But if I click on the button, it closes the app. So you'll come back here. You'll still use an event. So I'll first create a close event. Wait, close event. Remember the self value, then remember all events take an event attribute. Then what this basically does to be calling these other functions, self.close. That's it. Let's go and bind. So for a label to work as a button, you need it we need to bind it to button one. I'll show you what I mean. Self dot exit text dot bind. And if you've noted something is that the name of the event starts with capital letters. So you write the event. So button one means that if you click on it, then give it a lambda event. Then your function self dot close event. As you can see, it should take this event value. So I'll just go ahead and write my event, and it is done. Let's run the file. There's an error. Oh, I'm sorry. This should be a small u, not a capital U, button one, meaning that the name of the events are actually case sensitive. You can't mix capital with small letters, strictly capital letters for the beginning. Nice. As you can see, it has actually worked. Let me repeat that. So meaning that our exit text is now acting like a button, meaning that if I click on it, it closes. Before I forget, let us also bind the event to our menu button. So where's our menu button? So we'll first create an event. We'll do something similar to what we did on our close event. So let's create a resize event. Resize event. Remember the value self, then event. So what this event basically does is call out these other values. So self dot menu dot resize menu bar. So let's come back to our menu text and bind. So self dot menu text dot bind. So this takes two values, the event, then the function. So our event in this case will be button one. This is basically a simple click. Lambda event. self, then our function self dot resize event, and this actually takes the event value, and let's run and see. I don't know why it doesn't work. Let me check that out. Let's do this again. Nice. Meaning that in this video, we have managed to create multiple events, and I hope you actually understood on how creating events works. So as I mentioned earlier, you can actually go to the Tkinter main page and look or search about the Tkinter events, since they come in handy when creating your own personal projects. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm glad you could make it this far. Stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you'll get notified when I'll be releasing the part 2 of this video. Thank you very much, and let's meet in the next video.